My name is David Kinslow. I'm a 37-year-old black male. I have 5 kids, been married a few times, and in the Army National Guard and have been for 17 years. I used to be a drug and alcohol counselor. I have a degree in chemical dependency. Pretty spiritual guy, raised in the church. Dad was a pastor pretty much my entire life, so I'm a PK. A lot of people look to me as someone that they can come to for help. I've been there for a lot of people throughout my life. People look to me as someone that they can count on. I think it's something that's been earned after people have talked to me for a little bit, taking the chance to try to get to know me or whatnot. Then they feel comfortable, and it gets to that level. But initially, I think that you come across that I'm arrogant or stuck up or something because of maybe my attitude or demeanor, or just the confidence that I guess show to people. But then when I use my sense of humor or just different parts of my personality, break through that and get down to being real with people. And I think some people sometimes judge me based off of how many kids that I have, really. I actually don't even wonder. They just kind of make assumptions as to the type of person that I am or whatnot, instead of really looking at who I am or the story that's behind it. And I guess that first judgment, that probably has a lot to do with maybe social media, or I guess what's been placed out there as far as black men are concerned. You know, being young and having a lot of kids, and you must be a player or something, you know, that's not necessarily the case, but people's assumptions as to how that happened. I was born and raised in Tacoma, Washington, and then moved to Yakima. Gosh, I think I was 12 years old. I guess even from people that consider themselves to be the same race as me or whatnot, as far as being blacker, I guess I don't necessarily act the way that a lot of black people would expect me to act, and so I would act more white, right? Mm-hmm. Whatever that even means. I don't know right. Those things necessarily. They're both stereotypical things, and so I guess that would be a box that people would try to put me in, but I don't necessarily fit into one. So people would try to associate it with the fact that I spent most of my teenage years growing up in Yakima and not Tacoma. So that's the reason that I am the way that I am or whatnot. And I'm like, I don't think so. It doesn't have anything to do with Tacoma or Yakima, but my parents have a lot to do with that. The rules in my house have a lot to do with that. The church that I grew up in has a lot to do with that. My family dynamic, as far as my grandparents and siblings, what I saw growing up in the neighborhoods that I lived in, have a lot to do with how I am and who I am today. Just my parents being respectable people and teaching me to respect myself in regards to taking care of what I wore. Wasn't allowed to just dress any kind of way, act any kind of way. I won't say my shirt was always tucked in, but my clothes fit. My pants were pulled up. I looked decent and presentable at all times. At church, growing up, was normally a 3-piece suit until I was probably 12 years old. I wasn't allowed to cuss. Most recently, I was in Chicago. It was 1 o'clock in the morning or so. I had just gotten off a flight, and I was driving a rental car. I got pulled over. I believe it was for speeding. The cop that had pulled me over was really sketchy and almost scared and timid with me, because I'm a really big, scary guy. Very, very intimidating, you know?
Yeah.
And part of it, I believe, was protocol, but other parts of it, I believe, could have been associated to, I guess, what I looked like at that point in time. I think that, it was late, it was dark, I had on a baseball cap. It's probably either covering part of my head or it was backwards, I don't know. I looked really tired because it was late. I've been traveling all day on a flight. And even though I was talking about like my military background and whatnot, showed him my ID and everything, he still questioned me a lot in regards to what I was doing in town and why I was out so late. They have a large problem in that area in regards to like drug trafficking. I was in a car that was, of course, out of state because the license plates, because it was a rental. I was out of state my own self for having a Washington ID and being all the way over there. So just the whole situation all the way around was kind of sketch. But I feel like just that my skin color could have had something to do with apprehension around me. So, because I couldn't pinpoint one single thing, because I was really polite with him, kept my hands out. The way I'm talking to you right now is the way that I was talking to him, but he was really scared and timid and really sketched out about me. So, because there's even times in the workplace where I've been treated a certain way, or people have said certain things to me using sarcasm that kind of covers up the truth behind where it's coming from. Because I don't think people blatantly come out and said the truth about how they feel, but it just makes me feel a certain way based off of how they've treated me. I try to stay out of social media a lot. I don't do a lot in regards to it, and all of these different things that have happened as far as black men and cops and people being offended and the athletes standing up and or not standing up. But I think that all has to do with how we carry ourselves. And when I say carry ourselves, I mean the way we talk and the way that we dress, the music that we might listen to, maybe some of the morals that we have in regards to smoking or not type of stuff, or drinking or whatever, right? People tend to categorize. I mean, I think that I even do it my own self. So there's stereotypes that are out there, right?
Right.
And of course, not all stereotypes are true. If I'm a black male and let's say I listen to rap music, I drive a black car with black tinted windows, which I do, and I might have some nice wheels on it or something. My clothes might be a little bit bigger than they need to be, and I got a fitted baseball cap on, and I might be wearing some jewelry because I like jewelry. Then I could be categorized as like a gangster or a drug dealer or a pimp or whatnot, something negative in that connotation. But in my experience, in some situations that is true, but in a lot of situations, it's really based off of the community that a person was raised in and came from. Because if that's the social norm of the people in the neighborhood where they came from, or the city, it's how people dress and act. They've grown up in that social environment, and that's how they are. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they're up to no good. For the black male in media and everywhere else, it's just exemplified a little bit more. I mean, you can't watch a music video, you can't look at a magazine, you can't watch TV or anything without seeing that. I guess the full dynamic message would be, that just us as individuals have the ability to change someone's personal view, just one person at a time. And I think I wholeheartedly believe that. The cop that I dealt with in Chicago, I could have added to his own personal stereotype if he had one, or I could take away from it. I chose to try to take away from it and not add to whatever stereotype he may have had or learned. And based off of how he dressed, how he presented himself, and the whole nine, I think all of that plays a huge part into how we treat other people. Shouldn't be that way in regards to someone who's a professional, but it ends up being that way. My one thing would be, like, I don't cuss or anything, so I prefer people not to cuss at me. When carrying a conversation with me, to curse at me would be something that I would probably take in a negative manner and ask you politely to not, just out of respect. I'm not going to talk to you that way. Don't talk that way with me. You don't have to call me Mr. Kinslow, or you can say, hey brother, or hey bro. or hey mister or whatever. It doesn't matter. I know that people say hey bro more so to me than they would to someone else, and then they probably don't say that to everyone, but to me that's okay. So the social dynamic for me here, living and being born in the state of Washington, is a totally different experience than someone that's might be in New York or Florida or Arkansas. Here in Washington, we don't have a lot of cop beating things going on. A lot of stereotypes and things. People aren't affected by it a whole lot anymore, like they used to be.
Would you say that stereotyping or racial profiling in Washington State is better here?
I think it's gotten a lot better. In my neighborhood, I live downtown Tacoma. I got bums and prostitutes to worry about. I'm not worried about another social stereotype. I'm not scared of the guy that's sagging his pants and wearing gold chains and driving around bumping his music, and that person doesn't bother me. It's the prostitute that walks up to my window asking me what time it is and then trying to whisper in my ear. That bothers me. There was a time where, being a teenager in Yakima, Washington, where there was a certain city in Selah, Washington, that I couldn't drive through. The color of my skin was an automatic getting pulled over. It's not that way anymore. My kids live in Selah. There's a lot of people that are other races that live in that city now, and it used to not be that way. In the late 90s, the community grew, and more people of other races started occupying the city. I think it really came down to people being forced to interact with people of a different race or ethnic background, and having to be in community with them, work next to them, work alongside them, deal with them at the grocery store, and being forced to develop a new idea of the individual person instead of just living up to stereotypes. So the segregation caused the stereotype. When the segregation was broken down, it forced people to have to change their view.